My name is Liz Birkhauser. I am a graduate student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I'm in the Psychoactive Pharmaceutical Investigation Program in the School of Pharmacy. And along with my co-authors, Dr. Amanda Pratt and Dr. Cody Wenthur, we are going to be presenting on transdisciplinarity in psychedelic studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And we're just going to go over a state of the field review. There's a lot of information in here, so we're going to fly through a bunch of stuff, but feel free to find me later and we can talk a lot more about it.
Liz, I'm so sorry, but we cannot hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Talk louder. Okay. Better? Yeah. Okay. All right, so we're just going to quickly go over, I introduced myself. I'm going to orient us in the psychedelic landscape. We're going to talk about transdisciplinarity, and then we're going to go over the state of the field at the UW. And then we're really going to zoom in on one of the projects that I work on, and then we will most likely be out of time. So one of the things that I will ask is that I would love to hear your feedback at the end of this about things that you think are important that we talk about for psychedelic studies. And also, if you have any ideas for collaboration, please come find me at the end. All right, so to orient us in the psychedelic landscape, there's a lot happening. I don't know if you're seeing the headlines, but there's a lot of things happening. Many say that we're in a psychedelic renaissance. Things are happening now that were not happening a decade ago, even 5 years ago. These are just some of the headlines that I pulled recently. A few days ago, Kentucky announced that they're gonna put 42 million of their opiate settlement funds into exploring ibogaine as an alternative treatment for opiate use disorder. We're hoping to see the FDA approve MDMA, which is also known as ecstasy, for the treatment of PTSD in the beginning of 2024. Psilocybin is coming right behind that. Compass Pathways announced last week that they've just moved into their phase 3 trials. In the map here, this is from Psychedelic Alpha, which is a fantastic resource for what's going on in the psychedelic landscape. About 30 states out of 50 have something happening regarding changes in their regulation or legislation. All those dots indicate that things are changing at the local level. So this is all around us. Things are happening fast. There's hundreds of new startups. There's hundreds of new drugs in the pipeline. There's exponential increases in psychedelic tourism. All of this has ripple effects through our society, and this is on a global level. Okay, so transdisciplinarity. I'm grateful to be coming in like a few days after a lot of our presentations have started and to have the opportunities to talk with many of you. A lot of your work is already transdisciplinary. And essentially that means that it is a method of collaborative knowledge production involving stakeholders, transcending the borders of disciplines in academia to co-produce knowledge, addressing complex and challenging societal issues. These can potentially yield more robust, actionable, and impactful results. So that means including stakeholders inside of academia in different disciplines, as well as those out in the community, traditional knowledge holders, those in regulatory institutions, private institutions, not-for-profits, et cetera. But bringing everybody together to address some of these societal challenges to really make impactful change. In the terms of psychedelic studies, with it being so multifaceted and complex, I think this is really important. So a quote is, "Scientific rigor meets societal relevance," and I think that's really applicable. Great care should also be taken to make sure that this word is not used as an empty signifier. It's really easy to include it in the title of something, but it takes a lot of work, collaboration, communication, and time to make these things really come into fruition. You're working with people that have all different perspectives. Each of us has multiple perspectives. You know, I am in academia. I'm also a member of my society. My life has also been touched by mental illness. I see opiate use disorder in my community. We're all affected by many of these things. We're all participants in this experience. So while, you know, we each have our roles, we also have multiple roles inside of ourselves. So transdisciplinary can also be viewed as a way of being. I think there was, okay. So let's get into what's going on at the UW. About a decade ago, we had one of the first psilocybin clinical trials that looked at pharmacokinetics. Since then, we've also partnered with the Usona looking at their psilocybin and major depressive clinical trial, as well as partnering with MAPS for their phase 3 MDMA trial. We have a bunch of trials currently happening, as well as more in the chute, which I can't talk about. But this, coupled with the psychedelic humanities scholarship that's happening, has really started to help lay the foundation for transdisciplinary research at the UW. I do not have time to get into all of these, but many of these, like the art, music, and land activism across psychedelic cultures, which looked at the Weechal as well as the psychedelic humanities stuff, really was truly transdisciplinary in nature. One of the projects that we'll get into a little more is the Borghese Mellon Psychedelic Past, Present, and Futures. I'm one of the organizers for that, and we just got our funding renewed, so we'll talk about that in more detail in a second. So like I said, the clinical trials, as well as the Psychedelic Humanities Scholarship, led to the Transdisciplinary Center for Research in Psychoactive Substances, which is our new center. We also have a new program, which I'm also a part of, which is called the Psychoactive Pharmaceutical Investigation Program. It's a master's program, as well as there's a capstone component. We have about 100 students in it now, and we have really diverse backgrounds, and it trains different people to do a variety of different jobs in the psychedelic sector. And please find me if you want to talk about any of this more after. We also have our 3rd annual Psychedelic Symposium coming up, so stay tuned for that. All right, so diving into the Borghese Mellon Psychedelic Past, Present, and Futures workshop a little bit more. This is a workshop that's funded through the Center for Humanities. It was born out of a psychedelic working group at the UW with the intent to foster conversations about psychedelics in society from outside of psychedelic clinical science and drug development as a means to generate deeper understanding of what psychedelic studies might look like in the future. We investigate unresolved tensions around the context, consumption, commerce, and control of psychoactive and psychedelic substances in the past, present, and future. And really what these are is we invite people to collaborate and come together. It's not a place to present finished work, but instead bring ideas, present unfinished work, generate ideas, generate connections, and make other things happen. So last year we had 10 total events, which really varied in what they covered. We had over 400 participants come from both academia and the general public. We partnered with over 35 individuals and multiple entities across campus and beyond. We participated in Environmental Histories Week, as well as the Library Expansion Initiative. We generated multiple interviews and publications from our events, and I think my bullet point got messed up, but we also have a journal article that's in production and a conference presentation, and I will let you guess which one that is. It's also an opportunity for graduate student professionalization, as well as opportunities for participatory experiences. How am I doing on time? Okay. So these are some of the events that we put together. One of them was we looked at a 1619 manuscript that had never before been academically translated that documented the prohibition of peyote in colonial New Spain. What this did is it brought people into the special collection. So it acquainted people with a resource that they may have not ever heard of before. It also brought together a variety of different people, including Dr. Alberto Vargas, Laura Martin, and Jorge Hernandez Laza. We talked about prohibition. We talked about extermination of cultural traditional knowledge, pressures on peyote, and all of that is still applicable today, even though this was happening in 1619. And we also had Portia Sophia there, which is a nonprofit that's also in Madison. It's housed in the Usona Institute, and they have the Archival Research Network, which is a volunteer research network that they are looking at forming a searchable prior art library to prevent overreaching patents. And the patent landscape right now for psychedelics is like the Wild West because of the many years of prohibition. The traditional signifiers of something that, you know, is prior art or not prior art doesn't exist yet. because many of the research, the patents, all that stuff had to go underground. So the traditional things that patent approvers or even those seeking to get patents aren't there. So what Portia Sophia is trying to do is really to bring the prior art into a searchable database where anybody can find it. Another event that we had was called Public Relations, and we looked at narcotic and psychedelic drug knowledge dissemination materials. The archives at the American Institute for the History of Pharmacy, as well as in the School of Pharmacy, is a treasure trove of gems of psychedelic materials and narcotic materials. And so we pulled those out and we asked participants from the public as well as academia to come in to look at these with a critical eye, to look at who is producing these materials, what are they saying, and who are they delivering the information to. We oriented these materials in a timeline of different events that were happening in terms of drug discovery, prohibition, or other pertinent events. And it really, again, acquainted people with another resource, but also had people look at messaging that maybe, is out of date to what they're receiving now, but to be able to look at these things with a critical eye, especially who is creating and delivering the message. I think a lot of us know how damaging the war on drugs was, and to be able to look at things from a different perspective and have that space and time can help highlight those things a little bit. There's also a lot of messaging happening right now in the psychedelic sector, especially with all these different media channels and hype and excitement. There's a lot of misinformation out there. So it is important to look at this information with a critical eye. Another event we had was the Mycological Menagerie, which we partnered with the mycologists in the Pringle Lab, as well as we looked at set and setting at Usona. We went and toured their new facilities, which are pretty incredible. We also talked about the MEQ, which is an analytical tool that we use to gauge. It's a mystical experience questionnaire. It's how we quantify the psychedelic experience. It has some issues, but it's also a predictor of positive therapeutic outcome. So John Dunn and David Yaden from the Center for Consciousness Research at Johns Hopkins, and John's also from the UW, talked about that. One of my favorite events that we had was called Plants for the Apocalypse. This was a part of Environmental Histories Week. It was also a part of Earth Week. It gave nods to Bicycle Day, as well as 420. And we looked at all these plants up here and fungi through the lenses of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which is death, famine, war, and plague, and explored our relationships with those. Many of these are psychoactive and have really excellent and interesting histories and rich relationships with human use. This event is generating a longer term exhibit, as well as multiple other things. And I'm at time. So in conclusion, this is a quote that I use to end a lot of my presentations, but it's from Richard Evan Schultes, but it is a call for collaboration that we need all the disciplines to act together here so we can advance these studies as well as those outside of academia. And this is a call to us ethnobotanists and ethnobiologists and ethnopharmacologists, the people who really care about these relationships. We need you involved in this, and we need your voices to be heard, and those other voices that are often silenced. So I would like to thank the Society for Economic Botany and Ethnobiology, as well as Dr. Roberto Vargas, the Latin American, Caribbean, and Iberian Studies, and the NAVE Fund, as well as the UW Center for Humanities, my co-authors, and everybody else that we collaborated with and supported us, and of course, all of you for taking the time to come today. Please contact me, and if you would like to sign up for the Psychedelic Past, Present, and Futures mailing list, you can scan this code, and you'll receive emails about our events, which are sometimes in person, but they're also virtual and hybrid. And I would love to answer any of your questions or talk with you more later. And I'm at time, so thank you.